For male pirates, capture meant the gallows. But for women, punishment took many forms: years spent rotting in prison, or a quiet pardon that cost their freedom. Sometimes it wasn't a quick death at all, but a slower one. In this video, we'll uncover what really happened to female pirates after they were captured. Female pirates were rare and dangerous. Some disguised themselves as men to earn respect, while others fought openly, commanding crews that feared and followed them. They looted merchant ships, clashed with naval forces, and carved their names into waters ruled by empires. But life on the sea was never just adventure. It was rebellion. Every sail they raised was a challenge to the world that told them they couldn't. Every victory was a declaration of freedom. Still, even the most daring pirate knew one truth: freedom only lasted until the empire found you. For men, that meant the gallows. For women, it meant something far more unpredictable. The gallows and the cell. For most pirates, capture meant one thing: death. The law was simple, cold, and absolute. If you were caught plundering ships, you were branded an enemy of the crown. And enemies of the crown didn't get second chances, they got the noose. But for women, things were more complicated. The empire didn't just see them as criminals, it saw them as an insult to the natural order. A woman wielding a sword, commanding a crew, shouting orders over the roar of cannon fire, that was a threat far more unsettling than any storm at sea. And so when they were finally captured, punishment wasn't just about justice. It was about putting women back in their place and reminding them where they belonged. Bonny and Mary Red knew that better than anyone. In 1720, after a fierce battle in Jamaica, they were caught alongside their crew from Calico Jack's ship. The men were quickly sentenced to death, no debate and no delay. But when Anne and Mary stood before the court, they played their final card. They claimed they were pregnant. That single claim changed everything. The British law had a peculiar rule called pleading the belly. If a woman were carrying a child, she couldn't be executed, not until she gave birth. The court, bound by its own code, postponed the sentence. The women's lives, for the moment, were spared, but what came next was no mercy. They were thrown into prison, dark, disease-ridden cells that smelled of rot and hopelessness. Mary Red never made it out alive. Some said fever took her, others whispered that the prison's cruelty was so complete that death became her only escape. Bonny's fate, however, is a mystery. Records show she was released at some point, but then her name disappears completely after that. Some believe her father, a wealthy planter, paid for her freedom. Others think she escaped under a false identity and lived quietly until the end of her days. And then some swear she went back to the sea. We'll never know for sure, but one thing is certain: for female pirates, the death sentence didn't always end with a rope. Sometimes it meant rotting in a cell, sometimes it meant vanishing into history's blind spots, and sometimes the cruelest punishment of all was simply being forgotten. Pardon and retirement. Not every pirate's story ended in chains or on the gallows. A few managed to do the impossible, walk away from the life of blood and plunder untouched. And no one did it better than Zheng Yi Sao, the woman who outsmarted an empire. Zheng Yi Sao wasn't born into piracy. Her life began in Canton, China, working as a sex worker in the floating brothels that served sailors and merchants. There she met Zheng Yi, one of the most feared pirate captains on the South China Sea. Their marriage wasn't just romantic, it was strategic. Together they built one of the largest pirate fleets the world had ever seen. Over 70,000 men and 1,200 ships united under their flag. When Zheng Yi died suddenly in 1807, many expected his wife to vanish into history, as so many widows did. Instead, Zheng Yi Sao did the unthinkable. She took command. She tightened discipline with her own code of laws, demanded absolute loyalty, and punished betrayal without hesitation. Even the Qing Navy, the Portuguese, and the British traders learned to fear her red banners on the horizon. For years, the empire tried everything, from naval ambushes to bribing her allies, but nothing worked. Zheng Yi Sao was always one step ahead, but even the strongest storms lose their strength. After years of domination, the Chinese government finally offered her something no pirate could refuse: a pardon. Total forgiveness in exchange for surrender. It was the first deal of its kind, and Zheng Yi Sao saw what most pirates never did: a way to survive. In 1810, she agreed. She marched into the governor's office, not as a criminal begging for mercy, but as a woman negotiating terms. She demanded protection for her crew, the right to keep her wealth, and safety for her family. And unbelievably, she got it. Zheng Yi Sao retired peacefully, opening a gambling house and living out her life in comfort, something almost unheard of in the world of piracy. No ropes, no prison cells, no mysterious disappearances, just silence, gold, and peace. Her story is a rare one in the history of piracy, proof that survival wasn't always about luck or mercy. Sometimes it was about power. Zheng Yi Sao didn't escape because the empire forgave her. She escaped because they feared her. Not every captured pirate was lucky enough to find mercy. Some met their end not at sea, but under the shadow of the gallows, where the empire reminded the world that even the fiercest women could still be broken. One of them was Rachel Wall, the last woman ever hanged in Massachusetts, and one of the few confirmed female pirates in American history. Rachel began life as Rachel Schmidt on a quiet Presbyterian farm in Pennsylvania. But she never belonged there. The stillness of the fields bored her, and the endless sermons suffocated her. She was drawn instead to the docks, the smell of salt, the creak of wood, the sound of sails. The sea called to her long before she ever answered. One day, after being attacked by a group of girls near the waterfront, Rachel was rescued by a man named George Wall. He was charming and reckless, the kind of man who could make danger sound like destiny. They married and soon moved to Boston, but domestic life didn't suit them either. George took a job on a fishing schooner, and when he returned, he brought sailors, their lovers, and a dangerous idea: piracy. The plan was simple but brutal. After storms, Rachel would stand on the deck and cry for help. When passing ships came to the rescue, she and her crew would strike, robbing them blind, sometimes leaving no survivors. Between 1781 and 1782, their crew captured 12 boats, stole thousands in cash and valuables, and left 24 sailors dead. But the sea that once protected them turned against them. A storm wrecked their ship, killing George and the crew. Rachel washed ashore alone. She tried to start over, working as a servant in Boston, but she couldn't stay away from the docks. She began stealing again, small things at first, until she was caught trying to rip a woman's bonnet and nearly her tongue off. At her trial in 1789, she begged to be tried as a pirate, not a common thief. But the court saw no difference. She was sentenced to hang. Before her death, Rachel spoke softly to the crowd. "Into the hands of Almighty God I commit my soul, and die an unworthy member of the Presbyterian Church." And with that, Rachel Wall, the last woman to hang in Massachusetts, met her end not on the sea, but under a rope. Enjoying the story so far? Drop a like and subscribe. It really helps us keep uncovering forgotten tales like this one. Becoming a privateer, from outlaws to legal pirates. For a few women, capture didn't mean the end. It meant a new kind of beginning, one sanctioned by the very governments they once defied, and that once wanted them dead. In the brutal logic of the 17th and 18th centuries, when nations went to war, pirates suddenly became valuable. The same ships that once terrorized merchants could now be useful weapons, if only they flew the right flag. That's how some female pirates escaped death, by turning their crimes into service. One of the boldest examples was Grace O'Malley, the Irish pirate queen, a woman who refused to bow to anyone, not even a monarch. Grace was born at Belclare Castle near Westport in County Mayo, the only daughter of Chieftain Dubdara Black Oak O'Malley and his wife Maeve. The O'Malleys were no ordinary clan. They ruled Clew Bay and its coasts, thriving on trade with Spain and exporting hides and fish in exchange for wine, iron, and weapons. They also controlled the waters, demanding tolls from ships that dared pass through without paying. Under the old Brehon law, women could inherit and lead, and Grace did both. Her path was shaped by the sea and by defiance. As a child, she famously cut her hair short and disguised herself as a boy just to join her father's voyages, earning the nickname Mahaol, meaning the bald one. By her teens, she was already skilled in navigation and combat. At about 16, she married Donal and Chogaid O'Flaherty. Donnell of the Battles, forging a political alliance between two powerful Irish clans. Together, they raided enemy ships, seized strongholds like Rockfleet and Clare Island, and built a fleet of galleys and armed men. English officials later described her as a most famous feminine sea captain with the stoutness of courage of any man. By her 30s, Grace O'Malley had built a maritime empire, part trade, part piracy, and became one of the few women to openly defy English expansion during the Tudor conquest of Ireland. But even the fiercest pirate queen eventually faced the empire itself. When her sons were captured and her land seized by the English governor, Grace did what no one expected. She went straight to the top. She requested a personal audience with Queen Elizabeth I. The meeting was extraordinary, a clash of two queens from different worlds, held in Latin because neither spoke the other's language. Grace refused to bow, declaring herself an equal ruler in her own domain. And she negotiated like one too. She demanded her son's release, the restoration of her lands, and the removal of her political enemies. Against all odds, Elizabeth agreed. Grace O'Malley, once the scourge of English waters, walked away as a sanctioned privateer under the Crown's authority. The outlaw had become an ally. Her rebellion had turned into business. Across oceans and centuries, the fate of female pirates was never written in one ink. Some died in chains, others vanished into legend. But which is worse, death or being forgotten by history? If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing.